This is a Crowd podcast.
So let me ask you the hardest question.
Okay.
You're out hiking and your daughters are taken. Somebody sees you and snatches your daughters up. Honest to God, what's going to be your first option? What are you going to do first, Sam? You going to dial 911 or you going to dial me? I know this is going against everything that you've been taught and raised your entire life and your soul. I could see it in your face right now. Because every moral value you've ever been taught, your internal organs right now are saying the police would take too long, and you don't want to say that because you're on the radio. And I understand that, Sam, so you don't have to say anything. Because I can see your face right now. And I've seen it on many, many people throughout my life. And I feel your pain. And I care about you.
This is it. Possibly the last time I'll ever speak to KC. And I don't know what you're hoping for in this final episode. A twist? A big reveal? The concrete evidence that pieces the whole puzzle together? Well, I can't give you that. I can give you some answers, but more questions. A lot more questions. From me and him.
Has your perspective changed about me from the beginning to now?
And I'll tell you what I think about KC.
I want to hear your soul.
About Dee Dee.
When I think of him, I think of my hero.
And about what I believe right now. But before this final conversation, all I've been thinking about is Dee Dee. You don't forget a conversation like that, and something has been eating away at me. And if I've only got one episode left, let's hit the ground running. I'm Sam Walker, and this is American Vigilante, episode 12. What do we think? Do you know, I've obviously thought so much about everything we've talked about. And, you know, I've come back to you with questions that were kind of playing on my mind that I've been thinking about. And I was thinking today a lot about our conversations a couple of weeks ago. And there's just this thing that I haven't been able to get out of my head. And so I just wanted to ask you.
Yes, ma'am.
Straight question. Is Dee Dee your daughter?
No. I met their father probably, 8 or 9 times over a 3-year period before that incident happened. So he knew who I was, but we weren't like friends. I would go see my dad's best friend, and Dee Dee's father ran the whole facility for him. So he was like the brains behind everything. My dad's best friend's business was, it was suffering, and this is a worldwide business. This is a big deal. Yeah, it was affecting a lot of things, and that's why he reached out to me. But I love those 3 kids like they're my own, and that's the truth. I watched them grow up from little kids to full adults, and then the paths that they took on their own and the people they became was their doing. They could have let that shatter them. They could have used a million excuses that so many people use, but instead every one of them turned into one hell of a person. That makes me proud that I didn't find 3 people that became, dregs of society. So they're incredible people. I hope you have peace over all that, because I honestly feel terrible about how that affected you.
I hadn't realised that her dad was also there with you when you rescued them.
Yeah, I made a big exception there. He begged me to go. Begged me. And I was just like, shit. But he never went into the houses at all. He was in the back of the truck, and they were all, really pretty much asleep when I got him. But when their eyes opened, he was the first thing that they saw was their dad.
How is she since we spoke?
She's doing wonderful. Really, really doing well, actually.
Was she okay afterwards? Because she was obviously, understandably, really upset.
Oh, yeah. It ruffled her for a little bit, but that was it. I mean, it was a very short thing. It's long behind her, and the emotions of bringing that back for that short period was that. But she's got a really happy life right now, and nothing sways her from that. So she actually went right back into her rhythm and was just fine.
How was it for you? Because you were sitting there with her as she was telling that story.
You feel helpless. It's hard. It's very hard. All I could do was tell her that I loved her and feel like a complete scumbag for even wanting to know if she'd be willing to talk. But she was the one that jumped all over it right in the beginning. So I was like, well, if you really want to. She's like, yeah. Did talking to her impact your thoughts on how you would deal with a situation if you were in the same position as her family from 2 months ago to now?
I don't know if it did. What did change was how I felt about you. Before I spoke to Dee Dee, if it turned out that you were the world's greatest storyteller and you had made all of this up, I would have felt pissed off.
Yeah?
I would have felt pissed off that you had wasted my sweet time. But then I would have thought, you know what? It's been quite entertaining.
You would have hired me to write stories, right?
Yeah, right. I've learned some things. I've heard some tales, and that's probably where I would have settled. But after speaking to Dee Dee, if it turned out you're making all this up, I realized I'd feel betrayed. Because everything about the conversation with Dee Dee deeply affected me on so many levels. Of course, I found it horrific, shocking, upsetting, unbearable. But to realize that this young woman was only reliving her horror, the worst moments of her life, because of you. She wouldn't have ever told some random British woman about the worst moments of her life. But she did it for you. I got it, Casey. I got why you do this. What happened to the people who took those kids?
Geez, Sam, I don't know. Probably choked themselves, or I don't know, maybe they stepped in front of cars. I don't know. I hope that all of them got whatever was due to them.
I want to go back to a story you told me a long time ago. The Wrong Suspects. It was back in episode 2. And you talked about that man and you said, all that anybody needs to know is that man will never be a problem for anyone else's children ever again. And when you told me that, Casey, I left it at that. I didn't know you very well, but I know you better now. And I just wonder what did happen to that man. You murdered him, right?
No. God speaks to me and told me that he had changed his mind and he would never hurt anybody again. Who am I not to listen to God?
Oof. What do we think? I don't know about you, but I think we've had enough of the gory details. So here's something that's a bit different. It's the sort of thing that leaves you screaming, no way, and come on, that's too much. In episode 1, you remember the Mexican job. After Casey and Forrest had both removed the bullets from each other in a shack in a border town, they fled into America with the help of a female police officer. And I wanted to know, what happened to her?
So this is where it gets kind of cool. We got up to a place at the border where we could cross. And she told me, she goes, you got to take me with you. And I'm like, I can't. She goes, you have to. She goes, they're going to kill me. She goes, I can't stay. She goes, I can contact my family from the U.S. And I looked at Forrest. Her and Forrest had some real continuity. And I don't mean just flirting, like they really had continuity. And Forrest said, let me talk to you. And Forrest and I went over there, I don't know, 20 feet away. And he said, Casey, I'm going to marry this woman. And I about fell over. I did. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "I'm dead serious." And I was like, "Okay." So we took her with us. We smuggled ourselves across the border. We hiked into the inner part of the other city, came upon the Chevy Tahoe that was sitting there waiting for us. And we loaded up and went north. And Forrest ended up marrying Maria. They've been married for quite some time now.
I mean, that is a heck of a life change, isn't it? One moment, literally one moment, she's working as a police officer in a city in Mexico. And the next moment, she's crossing a border with an African-American guy she's just met who she's seen shoot up various people.
And now she's a mom.
That's a day.
Yep. And they did. They just completely fell in love. I mean, he was cooing to her the whole time I'm digging around his leg. He'd wince and whine a little bit, and she just kept putting her little hands on his face and looking him in the eyes, and that's what did it.
When we talked about your background, you told me you were a Comanche Indian. And then you told me that, in fact, you weren't a Comanche Indian.
Well, Sam, now damn it. You know, there's breadcrumbs that I'll leave that are actually true, and there's breadcrumbs that I'll leave that are true mostly.
So what else have you lied to me about?
I've just changed some locations and names. That's all. Like the CEO wasn't really the CEO. And, the Mexican job wasn't really in Mexico. And, there's just some little tidbits. I've just changed some things to make sure that the compass kept pointing north.
So is it to protect other people or protect yourself?
Well, both, of course. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be investigations started about this stuff. I'm no fool. There's no statute of limitations on murder. Of course, I've never committed a murder, so it doesn't really matter. But, there's going to be investigations. I'm not an idiot. And let them look. Let them look. Because there's nothing. They will waste millions of tax dollars and find nothing.
What sacrifices have you had to make personally to do what you do?
There's times I've been away from my family for extended periods. My son was born, and 2.5 weeks later, I was gone for 3 weeks.
You left your wife when she'd just given birth to your son.
I delivered my son.
To go and... You delivered your son?
I've delivered my children, yes.
And yet you felt so strongly about going and helping these strangers, because that's what they were, that you left your family. I just wanted to really explore the depth of that feeling.
But they're not strangers. They're Americans. I dread the day that I can't do this anymore, because I know somebody will pick up the torch, but it'll be hard sitting on the sidelines and watching this because, you can have all the will in the world, but if your body won't grant you the ability, then you got to be smart enough to step away so you don't get the people that you're trying to help hurt or the people that you love the most hurt.
You told me the first time we had a conversation that there were people who want you dead and that people who would do anything to see you die, and that's why you protect your identity. What about if they hurt your family, though? Is that not a concern that might happen?
I would hunt them down. I would kill them, their families, burn down their house, and eat their dog. So you better cut my fucking head off, quarter my body, and scatter me to the winds, because you will never make it if you hurt me or mine. There's a lot of people out there that love me, and every one of them's got a gun. I go down, I guarantee you, the shit show that'll follow, you won't be able to stop it.
Am I going to get a knock on the door one day, do you think? The things you've told me.
Who knows? I mean, I don't think you got anything to worry about from any bad guys because you don't know me. I mean, you really don't. You've talked to me across 1,000 miles on a computer. So, but, if investigations start, maybe. But there's really nothing to investigate.
So what shall I tell him?
You tell them whatever you think. I mean, if somebody approaches you to talk to you about me, they're gonna want your opinion, your take on that, you know? So if you think I'm touched in the head, then you should probably tell them that you think I'm touched in the head. And if you think it's like that one old gentleman that I raided those places and got rid of that huge, massive fucking drug den, and the cop showed up and he told him, he's like, that man did more in one night than you guys have done in the last 5 years. You know, I mean, tell him whatever you want, but I don't abuse the gift that God has given me. At least I don't feel I do. I just do my very best to right wrongs. And the only regret that I honestly have is that there's not 100 of me.
After the break, I've got another thing that I want to share with you. Perhaps a clue on how KC feels when he's talking to me. Back in a moment.
This is the story of a man who set out to redefine lust and desire. Hugh Hefner built an empire out of his fantasies. But what about the women who made Playboy? What can their stories tell us about sex and power, then and now? I'm Amy Rose Spiegel. From Something Else, this is Season 2 of Power. Out now. Listen and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You've watched them in unforgettable adventures, love affairs, and tragedies. Now it's time to hear their own remarkable stories. From the makers of Death of a Rock Star and Death of a Sports Star, this is Death of a Film Star.
And action.
Starring Heath Ledger, Marilyn Monroe, Chadwick Boseman, Robin Williams, Carrie Fisher, and Bruce Lee. Search for Death of a Film Star in your podcast app. You've seen them tell stories. Now it's time to tell theirs.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Check them out at betterhelp.com/AV. That's betterhelp.com/AV. See, going to therapy doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're investing in yourself to keep your mind healthy. It can be routine maintenance for your mental and emotional wellness. In the same way that you'll do those chores around the house, or you'll get someone to look at your car just to check in that it's okay. If you have a gym membership or you go for a run to keep yourself fit, this is no different, and it's just as important. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions. You don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. And American Vigilante listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/AV. That's betterhelp.com/AV.
Hello, I'm Katie Puckrick. Haven't I seen you on Wikipedia? 'Cause I'm there every day. I've got a new podcast called .com, the documentary series about the people of the internet. And it starts with that one site we all use, Wikipedia.
Yeah, sure, it's just a little website.
Who are these people?
But no, it's not.
The faces behind the screen, the brains behind the words.
If you'd said to me, it will all be free.
This is a hidden world.
A place where people can come together and talk about the things that are important to them.
And it's fascinating.
We've just found a way in the Wiki universe to do that.
I mean, how could Wikipedia not be corrupt at this point?
Search for .com and subscribe now.
How?
A couple of episodes back, I mentioned that hesitation, sometimes noticeable in people who are lying, wasn't a trait that KC had ever shown when speaking. And with his camera off, I've been listening out for any other clues or tells as they're known. which reveal how Casey is feeling at that moment. And apart from laughing and crying and, of course, breathing, there's just one I can hear. On several occasions, it sounds like Casey is rubbing parts of his body.
They're talking more and more about it and how he's been hired to do the work and, how they've met him and things like that.
It might be him rubbing his hands together or rubbing his face or neck.
It was late at night. I think it was around... No, it was in the morning. That's right. It was in the morning. It was what is that comes on? Can't remember. It was some morning show.
Or perhaps it's the hairs on his arms I can hear slipping and sliding under his moving palms.
So I did. I snuck up the house, and it's right around, I think, 10, 11 in the morning.
Now, I did a bit of research about body language, and these, I gather, and I am, of course, no expert, are a sort of pacifying exercise, a type of limbic response that us humans unconsciously make in a variety of ways to make ourselves feel nicer when we're experiencing a sense of discomfort.
And she says, "Young man, I don't have a lot of money." She said, "But I'd like to invite you to dinner."
Significantly, he's never done this during or after I've asked a question. As you might have noticed in those clips, it appears to only happen when he's being descriptive. Sometimes a person.
And it wasn't her husband, but this guy was in a different color shirt, but I couldn't tell.
Or a time or place.
And I asked if they knew which way he went, and they kind of pointed and said, "Well, we saw him drive that way."
Or an object.
The modifications to this are done so that it pretty much still just looks like a normal vehicle, other than it's slightly taller. It's got a little bit bigger tires on it.
Now, we cannot and should not conclude from this that he's telling lies, but simply that these memories or these descriptions, for some reason, make Casey feel the need to self-soothe. It's not necessarily a big thing. They are awful stories to have to tell. And all day, every day, we're all communicating with our bodies in different ways. But it's something. On with the conversation. And before I tell him what I really think of him, I ask KC what he thinks I think of him.
Well, Sam, I don't know what you think about me, honestly. If I had to form an opinion based upon the little I do know about you, I would think that you're kind of afraid of me. You're definitely afraid of people trying to contact you in regards to me because, you're British and this is the U.S. I think that you hold a small amount of respect for me because even though you don't factually know that what I'm saying is not crap, your instincts as a mother and as a woman and as a reporter, your instincts tell you that at least a majority of the things I'm telling you are very factual. And I think you think I'm a incredibly raw person at times that probably shouldn't do some of the things that I do. How'd I do? Tell me.
Do you know what? I think conflicted is a word I would use if we're going to get real for a moment and talk about...
I want you to be real.
Feelings. Yeah. Conflicted.
So what did you think of me when you first met me, Sam? I mean, we've never met, but, talking on a computer.
My first impressions of you was that you were super smart. There's you and there's what you do.
Yeah.
And I see those as two separate things.
Yep.
But as for what you do, I think I'd give a different answer now than I would 3 months ago.
Well, what would your answer have been 3 months ago?
I fundamentally disagree with what you do.
Say that in English. That was very politically correct. I want to hear you.
No, it wasn't.
I want to hear
correct.
your
No.
soul.
My absolute soul is that I fundamentally disagree with what you do.
Okay, so there was no thought in your head like, this guy's a fucking barbarian?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Wow, you'll be like one of the first, but okay, that's good. Sorry about that.
I've never thought you're a barbarian. I'm frightened by what you do. I'm frightened by some of your behavior.
I've done something to scare you? That was never my intention.
You've done plenty of things I find really scary.
I'm going to apologize for that, Sam. It's never been my intention to scare you. I mean, the stories are one thing, but me personally, that's the last thing I would ever want to do to you, honestly.
Well, you haven't ever said anything to me that I've felt threatened by or anything like that. I'm saying what you do I find scary. The stories you have told I find scary. But before you started telling me those stories when I first met you, my first thoughts were, holy shit, is this guy for real? Really? Really? The first couple of weeks, Casey, I was spent dissecting every single thing you told me. Everything. And I was like, that little thing doesn't quite add up. Now, is it because he's telling me about something that happened a decade ago? Is it because he's changing some of the facts because I know you're not giving me absolutely everything that happened at all times because you're super aware of not wanting to leave breadcrumbs? Or is it that he's making this shit up? And I've told you that before.
Oh, yeah. Has your perspective changed about me from the beginning to now?
Yes and no. I've got to know you, Casey. We've joked about the fact that there were some months I think I talked to you more than I talked to my own husband during the week. We talked and talked and talked. There's nothing black and white about you. You're not one thing. You are, I don't buy this, I'm just a poor mountain boy, I'm a dumb old mountain. I've never bought that. I have never ever bought that. I'm not doubting you were raised in the mountains of wherever the heck you were raised, but dumb is not a word I would ever use to describe you. A lot of what you do makes more sense to me now than it did 3 months ago. In some ways, I completely understand you. In other ways, I don't understand you at all. And I think there's that space between heart and head when it comes to how I feel about you. Because as I said, there are things that you do I fundamentally disagree with, perhaps on an intellectual level. Or maybe I just wish you didn't have to exist. Casey, I know that every time you go on a job, you are faced with an individual. Tell me about the different types of, quote, bad guy that you come up against.
Bad guys are as diverse as the leaves on trees. And, in today's society, using the term guy, that also means woman, female, because there's no difference. A bad guy's a bad guy. It's just the way it is. You've got bad guys that are the dregs of society. They're criminals of opportunity. They're the bums you see on the street. And you've got bad guys that are blue-collar guys. They'll work a job every day, 8-10 hours a day, and, they're doing something crazy and bad on the side. Then you got guys that are white-collar criminals. They're scamming and skimming stocks and, electronically robbing banks and people and credit cards. And you got bad guys that are just criminals only of opportunity. They will only strike somebody that they know is inferior or weak, and they'll never do it. They might go 10 years without doing anything wrong. But then all of a sudden, something presents itself, and boom, they'll do it. And then you got people that are the military within the bad guys, the enforcers. They're the tough guys. And they're just straight thugs. They're murderers. They're killers. There's gangs out there. They've got these enforcers, and they're trained by special operations military from other countries. There's a gang in the U.S., it's called the MS-13. Probably one of the most incredible forces in the United States. They have their commanders. They have their lieutenants. They have their sergeants. And they originally were created because, people from Central America were coming to the U.S. as refugees. What happened was the Crips and the Bloods started preying, raping the women, beating up the old people, stealing their groceries, stealing their money. Well, some of these refugees were former Special Operations El Salvadorians, and they got fucking pissed off. And they put a group of them together, and they became enforcers, making sure that the El Salvadorans were protected in L.A. So, you've got bad guys in there that are the elite. You got bad guys that are the enforcers. I would say that a lot of the more powerful bad guys are definitely narcissists. You look at bad guys. Here, let me name off a few that I'm sure everybody in the world will know. The Green River Killer. Holy God. I was in school when the Green River Killer was doing this thing, and he was so cunning. And then look at the Zodiac Killer. I mean, that man taunted police, and they still never caught him to this day. The man was obviously an intellectual, and I know it was a man, just from my own research and studies. I would love to have had the opportunity to catch the Zodiac Killer, because I honestly think I could have caught him. But at that time, I was too young. I was a kid. Whenever we first talked, Sam, I mean, the very beginning of this, months ago, you'd said when you first got here you had a pretty rough experience. Something about a landlord, and I really don't know the intricate details of that, but yeah, I remember you saying that you were afraid and that you guys were really mistreated. So if that had happened to you over there in the UK, how would that have been handled by you?
How it would have been handled by me is I would have felt a lot less afraid. I would have felt more that I had rights. I would have felt that I could fight more.
What do you mean by that?
Well, someone threatening me with a gun wouldn't have happened in England. It wouldn't have happened. And if it did, it would have been so far off the scale, the police would have swooped in and gone, what the heck?
Right.
But he took advantage of the fact that we were naive, that we were immigrants, and all of those things. It was awful. You
were approached, from what I understand, by people that cared about you. Something that even in England might not have happened, and you were made to feel better, from what I understand. What happened? We were approached and told very clearly by somebody that we knew, who knew somebody else, that they told this somebody else what had happened. And that person knew someone else and said, if you want, say the word, and we'll make sure this guy's not a problem for you or anybody else again. The phrase was, we could take him out into the desert. And just for the record, that wasn't me, right? That would have been a big old coincidence, but that was absolutely not you. But imagine if it had been. No, and literally that's as far as the conversation went. Right. But it made you aware that there was a different type of a culture here, so to speak, on a different level when it was needed. But then, what were your thoughts? Was the first thing that went through my head. And if we're going to talk real, I fantasize about that man getting his comeuppance because... Oh, yeah. When it come to your kids, you bet the she-bear in you comes out that I knew was there. Well, I got my kids out of that house within 15 minutes. And I tell you, and I am not exaggerating, when someone I knew, I literally called and said, can you come and get my kids now? And I packed their bags and I got them out in 15 minutes because I didn't know if this guy was on the way. He was furious. He was crazy. And I'd called the police at the same time. But when this person came and took my kids away, it flashed through my head, are they going to see their parents again? I have never been scared in my life until that moment. I'm very privileged. I'm lucky. I've never felt actual fear. We just wanted to get away, which we did. We literally loaded up a U-Haul, a big truck, and drove everything we owned out in a U-Haul to the middle of the desert. And it sat there for 2 weeks while we stayed with people. We rented an RV and drove around. We had nowhere to go because we couldn't find another property to rent. So we kind of hoped our truck full of all of our things was still in the desert when we went back. But luckily it was. But I didn't ever investigate further than that comment that was made to me because I couldn't have been responsible for someone else being harmed. I just couldn't have done it. Yeah, it's not the type of person you are. I understand. And, you know, I've told that story, Casey, to someone else, and they said, it's your duty. They said to me, it's your duty. You need to stop this happening to other people. You need to make sure that that person never does anything ever again. And I was like, I just got to protect my kids, actually, is what I need to do. If someone you loved was in imminent danger or had been taken, do you think you'd try to contact me? You know, when I was scared for my family, if that happened today, Casey, where I was threatened by someone who used to turn up at my door with a gun and be threatening, and he had keys to my house where my kids were sleeping, I'd call you and say help. Because I didn't know where to go or what to do. Because my own house that I should have felt safe in was the one place where I didn't feel safe.
And if only for you to come and stand outside my front door so I could pack my things and leave, I would have felt safe.
You know, Sam, the world is a wonderful and beautiful and incredible place. But some weeds grow in those gardens, and sometimes you just gotta weed them out, Sam. Doesn't mean the garden's bad. Just means that weeds can suck the life out of the good plants. And when you pull a weed, Sam, you don't cry over it.
So what's your advice to parents? Because I guess people think, well, if I get worried about being hit by a bus, I'll never leave the house. And there might be people thinking, yeah, that is traumatizing, so therefore I'm never going to leave the house with my kids, because if there's that many bad guys out there, how the heck do I deal with it? What do you say to them?
Well, you shouldn't live in fear. Nobody should. I mean, life does happen, right? But you can be productive. I mean, you want to put pictures of your kid on your Facebook account? Great. But be smart enough to use a regular camera. And I'm telling you, I mean, there's 2 cases that I got kids back that were taken because they were located off of a Facebook account by photos. So, you know, you need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to be aware of what your children are doing on the computers. And you need to just try to be the best parent you can be. Don't live in fear, but live in reality.
What are your hopes for the future of this country?
Honestly, what for people to just realize that we're all Americans. All that politically corrupt shit needs to just go away, and people need to quit pecking at little itty-bitty stuff that doesn't matter and start applying all that energy into bringing unity to my country. Because if all the division stuff goes away and the country truly starts to unify, that would be my wish.
Do you think people are more afraid today than they used to be? Is there more fear around?
People and animals are afraid of the unknown. Anything different. It's a self-preservation thing. So I wouldn't call it fear. I would call it a lack of education on a lot of things. Fear is your best friend. God gives you fear the same reason he gives you scabs. So you heal. You get a cut, that cut's going to be open and bleeding, but if there's no scab, it ain't never going to heal. And when it heals, what's left? There's a scar, isn't there? But that spot on you right there, it's tougher than it was before you cut it. Fear's the same way. Fear does a wonderful thing for you. Fear creates adrenaline. Adrenaline makes you fast, and it makes you strong, and it makes you smart. It makes your hearing work better. It makes your eyesight better. Adrenaline turns you superhuman. If only for a few minutes or a half an hour, adrenaline turns you into an incredible thing, and you couldn't get adrenaline without a little bit of fear. So, it's okay to be afraid. And you push through that fear, and that's where you find courage. Courage just means that you walked through fear and did what you needed to do. I was terrified this one time. So this teacher, I had to face a man that was phenomenally strong. This was in high school. And he was big and strong. And I mean, he's that guy you could see every muscle in his body. He was just a rock. And I had to face this guy, and I was terrified. And this one teacher, it started the beginning of class, and he saw my face that morning, and this was the day I was going to have to face this guy on a wrestling mat. And he says, "What's wrong with you today?" I said, "I'm scared." And the whole class is sitting there. And he goes, "Let me tell you something." And he had the day's lesson on the chalkboard. I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. He walks up there with the eraser, one of them big erasers, and he erased that whole chalkboard with the entire day's lesson on there. And he took a third of that chalkboard, and in huge letters, like 12 inches tall, he writes, "Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man. Sooner or later, the man who wins is the one who thinks he can." He wrote those very words that day. And I memorized them. When I stepped out on that mat that day, I gave everything I had. I won. I won with only a few seconds left in the last round, but I won. And I wasn't stronger than him, and I wasn't faster than him, but I faced my demons. So it doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, how small you are. All you've got to do is face your demons, and you'll make a difference. And if you only make a difference in one person's life, in your entire life, only one person, you've probably done more than just about everybody in this world. Face your demons.
Do you worry about dying?
Never. Not even once. I've lived the warrior's code my whole life, and I don't think I'd like anything more than to die by it.
Where do you want your final resting place to be? What plans do you have in place?
If I had a choice, I would want somebody that I love to walk me up into the mountains and just let me sit there and die. That would be what I'd want. Just leave me alone with nature and let me become part of it and bury me on that spot. But I doubt I'll get that choice.
This is our final conversation. We've never met. We've talked for hours and hours and hours and hours. You've opened the door to a world I didn't know existed. You know, it's been a crazy summer.
Yeah, a little unique, huh?
Yeah. So, what next, Casey?
I don't know, Sam. I don't know. I don't know personally what you feel about me or your husband feels about me because, I know that you guys have to talk about this stuff. I'm sure you've got off that mic several times and been crying. And, if he's any kind of a husband, he's definitely giving you a hug and a shoulder, wipe the snot off your nose. But I would hope that one day we could meet. Of course, if the look of my face doesn't traumatize you too bad, we might even sit down and have lunch or coffee or something.
You trust me enough to do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not like I would broadcast when I was going to show up or where I was going to show up, but if I knew you were receptive to that, I'd make it known in a short time before I was going to get there that I was going to be in the area and let you know. Yeah. But I sure wouldn't get hold of a network and put it all over the internet, whether it was 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years from now. It'd just be one of those things that one of these days I'd be like, hey, Sam, you want to grab a cup of Joe?
So, this definitely is it. The last time Casey and I speak. I suppose you want me to tell you exactly what I believe and don't believe. Well, it's not that simple. If I were to get a call next week with some compelling evidence that Casey is in fact a bus driver, it wouldn't be outside the realms of possibility. But if you were equally to tell me that actually he works for the White House and it goes all the way to the president, again, I could probably accept that too. I just don't know. Do I feel differently about him from the very first time we spoke? Undoubtedly. Do I believe that he has rescued kidnapped children and found criminals? Yeah, I do. Do I believe everything he's told me 100%? No. Did he frustrate me, upset me, make me angry? Yeah, he did, many times. But did he also make me laugh and surprise me with moments of kindness and compassion? Yes to that, too. And I know that you feel the same way looking at some of the many messages you've sent me over the past few weeks. Messages like, why didn't you call him out more on some of the stories he told you and get him to verify more facts? Well, the very nature of what he does means there isn't going to be a record of it. And you Google kidnapped child return to parents, America, and see what you come up with. And If I'd said to him, "Oh, come on," every time he said something that I thought, "Really?" he would have walked away. Without a doubt, there would be no series. Which kind of leads me into the second set of questions and comments, which fall under the I need to know if Casey is the real deal and whether he's the good guy or the bad guy. And these are ones I find most interesting. Because today we live in such a binary world. All of us are under massive pressure to state our position on just about everything, from politics to religion to COVID, you name it. You must take sides. You must nail your colours to the mast. And I don't think that's always possible or helpful. And throughout all my time talking to KC, I've thought how hard it is to sit and stay in that grey area, in the I don't know zone. And I don't know. What I do know is I approach this project with the view that it's so unusual in today's world to sit down and talk with someone who comes from a very different culture to you, has differences in their values and purposes to the ones that you hold, and just talk to them. And more importantly, listen. How rare is that in this 256 character culture that we find ourselves in? In terms of his veracity, well, again, I don't have a definitive answer. Things I would point out, though, are for the hours that Casey and I talked, he wasn't reading from anything. We had stops and starts, and we went off on tangents, and he always jumped right back into the story, even if it was weeks apart. Remember, two things can be true. Casey could be a vigilante and a great storyteller. Would you believe him more if he was less eloquent? And finally, you've asked, have you met Casey? Would you like to? And the answer there is no, not yet. We have not met. And what do they say? To really understand someone, walk a mile in their shoes. So maybe that's the next step. Deep breath to actually meet this man, see his home, how he lives his life, maybe even meet his team or watch him within reason in action. I don't know. Although he did often scare me and make me uncomfortable, you can't talk to someone intensely for more than 60 hours over several months and not form a connection with them.
I want to give you a sincere apology, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm sorry for bringing you into my world, because I know it has affected you and your family. It's a whole different world once you know these things. So my apology to you is sincere.
It feels weird that this is one of the final times we're going to speak.
It's been nice. I think you'd be a good friend, Sam. And I do pray for you and your family. That may or may not mean anything to you, but I do.
Take care, Casey.
Take care, Sam. Love you, Sam.
American Vigilante is a Crowd Network original. It's presented by me, Sam Walker. It was produced by Phil Brown and Steve Jones. The executive producer for Crowd is Mike Carr. Associate producer for Stowaway Entertainment is Jeff Singer. The music we used is from our partners, BMG Production Music. If you'd like another Crowd podcast to listen to, try We Didn't Start the Fire. It's a modern history podcast inspired by the lyrics of Billy Joel, covering JFK, Vietnam, Watergate, North Korea, Stalin, Einstein, Castro, Marilyn Monroe, and plenty in between. There's a new episode every Monday as they explore the post-war world and try and work out why the world is like it is today. Search for We Didn't Start the Fire in your podcast app.
Crowd Network, a place where you belong.
Hello, I'm Katie Puckrick. Haven't I seen you on Wikipedia? Because I'm there every day. I've got a new podcast called .com, the documentary series about the people of the internet. And it starts with that one site we all use, Wikipedia.
Yeah, sure, it's just a little website.
Who are these people?
But it's not.
The faces behind the screen, the brains behind the words.
If you'd said to me, it will all be free.
This is a hidden world.
A place where people can come together and talk about the things that are important to them.
And it's fascinating.
We've just found a way in the Wiki universe to do that.
I mean, how could Wikipedia not be corrupt at this point?
Search for .com and subscribe now.
How?